All right, I do believe we are live after 2 days off for some infrastructure changes around here and also some sleep. Oh, welcome back to the stream here, in the recording at least. Tico is all snuggled right behind me in the chair, which is his new thing, and I'm not complaining about that, as long as he and I can basically share space effectively. Let's get Tico on the screen here. Oh, cat. He is very cat. It's like an awkward angle to actually pet him comfortably and also not block the camera completely. Yeah, good evening, folks. I keep wanting to get the stream done early, but I was also fighting a bunch of technology mess, and I think I've maybe at long last had a little bit of localized triumph against the technology mess, and we can do a little bit of kernel debugging now, and then maybe my stream can be a little bit more plug and play for future early streams. Oh, nice. Hello, hello. Looks like we've got some more information technology maintenance in the chat. Yeah, man, computers always demand so much time. At least if you want them to work all right. Seems like a lot of what the the industry is built up around computers is sort of paying people to do the labor that you can then pretend doesn't exist, but because the technology is doing the work. Anyway, I think, so this project we've been hacking around on is, I've just been trying to get Linux running on a kind of old 486 embedded system. Maybe I can take this opportunity to reposition the camera slightly. So this is the motherboard out of an old voting machine. It has two of these PCMCIA slots at the top, which I've got populated with an old 10BASE-T network card, and then sort of a couple of adapters that give us a reasonably large quantity of more modern storage. So a 64 gig SD card, and then an SD to CF adapter, and a CF to PCMCIA adapter. And then on the bottom is a CF card, which is small enough that the BIOS on this can tolerate booting off of it. And that is only 64 megs, and that's what our kernel and the first file system we boot off of lives on. And then I've been trying to pivot over to a networked file system, although there's also the option of putting a file system on that big SD card. And it's got this 1024 by 768 screen with a touchscreen overlay. I'd like to get the touchscreen working if we can. We did a little bit of poking around with that, but really right now the biggest problem I'm having is that the PCMCIA slots, which I've been trying to use for additional storage and for networking, are just really unreliable at the moment. I did one bug fix / workaround that fixed a memory allocation problem where some of the I/O space that was supposed to be used for allocating or for accessing memory on the PCMCIA the PCMCIA slots. That memory region was actually being decoded as accesses to BIOS. So, of course, the driver was failing, but it was failing in a pretty amusing way because it was trying to read the beginning of the card information structure, and it was just seeing the beginning of the video BIOS instead. So I traced that down to what seems to be a quirk of the PC card controller, which is documented in the manual, and worked around it with some parameters for the PC card user space software and for Grub. So that got the card working well enough that we got on the network, but the IRQ delivery has been just kind of a perplexing problem. It seems like under certain circumstances it doesn't work at all. Under other circumstances it does. I was originally having an okay time with IRQs on the storage, so even though the network was complaining about lost IRQs, the legacy parallel ATA device, represented by that compact flash card, which was actually a 64 gig SD card, that was getting IRQs just fine. So then some combinations seem to affect it. Like if I loaded a device that registered a serial port interrupt handler that was sharing an IRQ with the network card, then the network card would work. So there's this sort of weird workaround. Yeah, but it really seems like something is still going wrong and we haven't gotten to the bottom of the problem. But it does seem like we can rule out any kind of just permanently unimplemented or broken hardware. So it isn't like the IRQs just don't work on either slot. We know both slots work under some circumstances, under, some configurations. So that's one problem. There's a potentially even more immediate and possibly even simpler problem that we're going to hit in the kernel debugger, though, which is that one of these initialization steps was throwing an enomem error no, like an error response, and that didn't even seem to be related to actual memory exhaustion, but it's probably just some kind of like more nuanced error code related to a resource exhaustion situation. So that might require some kernel debugging to track down. So I think that's what the stream is going to be about. Oh, Tuco. Maybe he can just hang out there and I can keep him in focus. All right. Between the last stream and this stream, I totally rebuilt a bunch of parts of my streaming infrastructure. And I think it's working much better now, but it was a lot of change. I can move these things out of the way. Oops. Several streams ago, there was this thing I did where I took apart a USB ground loop isolator that I was planning on using. I feel like I have an even better solution for that now, which is to run everything through a power over Ethernet Raspberry Pi. So of course it's got its own isolation via the Ethernet and the PoE adapter. But then it's the one directly connected to the USB on the audio interface. And a Raspberry Pi 2 is running the Jack network server just quite nicely. So it's basically providing a master clock out to all my other audio devices on the local network segment there. And then I can basically, I mean, why am I saying basically again? I can use either of the Linux workstations here that I'm doing my streams from as sources for audio out the speakers, or I can like monitor what I'm doing with the headphones, or I can even just share a reference clock, and that seems to be pretty nice. Tuco is so soft, it's kind of distracting. Also, I wanted to use this RN noise reduction plugin, which seems to be mostly working great. It would be nice to have slightly more nuanced tuning, because there's a gating option and it's got these integer steps, and I kind of want it set somewhere in between 1 and 0 at the moment. But it's mostly all right. I already had to patch it once because it was interacting badly with what seems to be a slightly more paranoid build of libstandard C++ than it was designed for. So it was throwing a runtime assertion just from calling the the vector indexing operator on index 0 on an empty array, because technically that's out of bounds. But the code was just doing it to calculate a pointer to a memset with a length of 0. But it's still technically an out of bounds pointer. So the C standard library had a point there. So soft, gosh. But yeah, now I can just have like this machine having a big old multi-channel recorder that just gets all my raw video for later editing if I want it. And then I reformatted the machine that was running all my streams using Windows 10 and installed Arch on it, and now it's still OBS, but a while ago I was using Ableton for the audio, and then I switched to Voice Meter on Windows, and now I switched to Ardor on Linux, and that seems to be actually what I wanted finally. It's nice to be able to do things like disable the compositor and have a kernel with slightly better real-time support than like Windows. And it was nice to actually I was fairly sure that all the video interface stuff that I was using would work under Arch, since I had just set up all of that on this other machine here. So yeah, it's nice to do a little bit of maintenance, make things a little nicer. Anyway. Kernel debugging. We should test this because it's been a couple days and I've been debugging other stuff, but I think the failure that we're going to see first is going to be that that weird mem that shows up when we're just trying to like bind devices to the PCMCIA cards. I don't know what's up with this. The PCMCIA subsystem in Linux is weird. If anybody is new here, this is my cat Tuco, and he's really cool. He's been really interested in just attention and being close by lately, which has been kind of nice. Oh, this wants to flash the card. Gating, there we go. That gating gets really aggressive when I haven't been talking for a second. Interesting. Hey, Tuco. Butt cam. Hey, Tuco. Oh, he's purring a bunch. Oh, Tuco, what you thinking about? Tuco. Yeah, maybe that voice noise filter doesn't really open the gate for cat noises. Let's try turning that off. Oh, there's a little bit of purr. Aw. It's a good question. Someone's wondering if I would consider myself a computer geek. Yeah, basically. I mean, these days I've got a pretty solidly love-hate relationship with computers. But, yeah, I mean, I've been a computer geek for a long time, and I don't think I ever stopped. Yeah, that's with the threshold all the way down. It just barely lets cat purrs through. Yeah, I'll need a different background noise removal technique for the cat mic in the future. But oh gosh, it's nice to actually have a working audio workstation for this again, and without dropouts all the time, and with low latency. I'm still kind of in disbelief that the audio server for this is running on a Raspberry Pi 2. I could try booting this thing. The card's been done for a minute. Oh, hey, those are some cat noises. Took. Really should just put a band pass filter that just gets the purrs. Was that Tuco making noise, or is that me causing a DSP underrun by fussing with the UI? I think some of those clicks are cat purrs. So it looks like we do have a network driver loaded. The parallel ATA driver had failed with that -12. Oh. There's a comment that somehow every file system is read-only. That might just be the default state when you boot. And in most configurations, the init scripts have to flip file systems to read-write. You can use mount-o remount w or rw, unless the file system has errors or like the underlying block device is write protected. This isn't like a Tuco chewed through the network cable related problem, is it? Because I saw Tuco hanging out over there. He might have chewed on this cable. Gosh, these mics pick up so much EMI. Aw. Oh, there's a question about whether I've played with RP2040. Is that their new microcontroller chip? I have not. I basically haven't been buying any new electronics with some very limited exceptions. Like I got a couple of new things for the studio. I guess acoustic tiles don't count as electronics. I mean, I got these PC cards recently for the voting machine, but that's not really new. Ah, Tuco likes this. Alright, I was going to add an EQ, but I don't actually know how to use this EQ plugin. Ooh, there we go. Oh, there we go. Are we going to low pass just the cat rumbles? Maybe I can notch out some of that interference. Oh, too quick, you going. So much for that. Well, cool. I can at least like toggle these presets pretty easily. I can just leave it on the auto noise suppressor when Tuco's not there. Coax cable problem. I mean, there is no coax cable. That would be a problem. Oh, there we go. Gosh, I thought I had this not on autofocus. Sorry about that. Oh, I did. It just didn't actually upload the settings to the device until I opened the dialog box. Thanks. Yeah, gosh, same thing for this camera. Always more in the setup to debug. Anyway, it looks like the cat hasn't permanently damaged the cable because we are getting pings through, but we are dropping interrupts, and I think this driver has some kind of fallback mode where if it detects that interrupts are not happening reliably, it can still make some forward progress by checking to see if a pending interrupt is there when it wakes up every 10 milliseconds for like a, like a connection status polling. So that's why we're seeing these ping times that are either 10 milliseconds or 20 milliseconds. Whereas I think really this machine is slow, but if the interrupts were working properly, we should be able to get more like, 3 milliseconds or so. Oh, right, and I can't control C from here because it's that broken shell time. But that's okay. I mean, this reproduces basically the problem I was interested in, and I think we need to dip into the kernel. I think user space is not where we need to hang out today. Ooh, did the beeps not actually make it through the filter? That's interesting. Hmm. That was promising for a minute, but now I seem to have lost control. Relatable, right? Oh, Tuco, don't climb that. Hmm. I should make a proper adapter cable for this. It's still alligator clipped on, and of course one of the clips came loose. So that explains why I could see the menu but not interact with it. I think Tuco wants me to open that. Well, props to RN Noise for doing a pretty good job with this so far. Oh, just a sec. Ah, Oh, that's better. Yeah, okay. HDMI capture device froze. Hmm. There's some kind of echo, apparently. Can anyone confirm that? Hmm. Gosh, so many things are different in small ways between OBS for Windows and OBS for Linux. Tuco's yelling again. Thanks, Tuco. There's a question about what bug I'm fixing. I mean, right in this moment, I'm trying to figure out why my HDMI grabber is frozen. But the kernel bug I'm trying to fix is that the the PCMCIA slots on this old motherboard are not working reliably, and so I've been able to get them both into a state where they're working, and I have a network adapter in one slot and a disk in the other slot, and I'm copying between them, and they're both generating interrupts. But it seems like the configuration is subject to some forces that I don't quite understand. And I've also been able to get it pretty easily into a configuration where it's just dropping interrupts and the network only sort of kind of works, or where the disk interface doesn't work at all. Let me see if Tuco wants in. Tuco. Yeah, one of the things I thought was related to the problem was, it seemed like it was the assignment of the physical IRQ on the interrupt controller that was causing the issue. So I tried reserving one of the IRQs, and that seemed to fix it for a minute, but then, it stopped fixing it. So I clearly don't understand what's actually going on. Tuco, is this okay? Oh my gosh, I might have to go to the equipment rack and unplug this grabber and plug it back in. Be right back. Even fix it. Gosh. Really? Oh, this is a great glitch to have so far. So has it been sitting there booting the kernel this entire time? Right. It would be nice if the messages came out on VGA and serial, not just one or the other, right? Yeah, no, I think I understand what the echo was. I had multiple mics turned on here, and I was expecting that the filter was only going to actually enable the gating for the mic that I was actually next to, but I think it was sensitive enough. It was enabled for the other mic too. So I can just adjust that some more. Hey, Tuco. Oh, click. Tuco. So, I really do need a way to fix this. Oh, here we go. Two steps. I had to unplug and replug it, and then I had to switch the device from no device to the actually correct device. I think in OBS for Windows there was actually a deactivate reactivate button. Like, this is one of the things I had to do to fix my setup here, is I had to, take the same OBS configuration files and then modify all the bits that were platform specific. So like all the video encoding stuff had to change, and some of the video capture plugins had to be different. Had to replace the direct show with V4L. But conveniently, all the deck link stuff stayed the same. Tugo, this is not comfortable. I think he's leaving room for me to sit down, though, so really I guess it's my own fault. Okay. Cool. So we have a bunch of the built-in drivers. I'm pretty sure I didn't build in the PCMCIA card drivers since I was having trouble with that. So yeah, I've got that. So yeah, I have a bunch of modules. I tried to build in most of the things that I knew I would always want, but then, anything that I might want to load late or load with parameters should be a module. Oh yeah, I should have clarified this. There's a good question. They're wondering if this white window is a serial console connected to this i386 board. Yeah, it's like a 486 compatible voting machine motherboard. It's got a AMD AM486 core system on chip with a bunch of PC-AT compatible peripherals, and then a couple of additional sort of AT sort of ecosystem peripherals like a Super I/O chip and a Chips and Technologies video adapter that go on the motherboard. And it's got 3 serial ports. One goes to the onboard touchscreen controller, and then 2 go to off-board connectors. And I've got one of those wired up to a Raspberry Pi, which has got the serial terminal in that white window. And then the camera is looking at the 1024 by 768 touchscreen, which also emulates VGA. And in my chair, there's a cat. So, we didn't try to load that yet, but what is the minimum? So usually there's a bunch of stuff we would do in the init scripts. How much of that have we done? Oh, right, we did none of it because I'm booting in kernel debugging mode, which boots with init equals /bin/sh. So we aren't running any of the normal startup scripts. Mm. That's a question about whether it booted into single user mode. Sort of. I mean, single user mode's just like an idea, man. It's just like a way of writing a grub config, right? But yeah, basically. Slightly more importantly than that, though, I have this boot configuration set up to enable kernel debugging over the serial port. So as soon as I make sure that I can actually reproduce the problem I'm interested in looking at, I want to do that with kernel breakpoints ready. Such a cat, right? We gotta get a close up of this cat. Yeah, in this case, the parameters that are important are not even really grub specific. I'm just really changing the Linux kernel command line. So to boot, normally I don't pass very many options. I think I'm mostly just setting the root file system. But then some of the grub menu items I just have set to enable like a serial console or enable the kernel debugging or, different combinations of this and that. And it's just because, there are different scenarios that I often find myself in, and I don't want to like devise a completely new kernel command line from scratch. Even though you can do that in Grub, you can just type in whatever you want. It's nice to basically have presets. Kitty. So yeah, I want to basically do, I don't know why I keep saying basically. It doesn't actually mean anything. It's just a stall. Um, 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 um. Tuco's better at this. He just doesn't say anything. Anyway, those things that are highlighted, I think, are the things that I actually do want to do before starting any kind of kernel debugging. I think I can just set a breakpoint on the something in parallel ATA PCMCIA though, as long as we have the debugger attached before running any of this. So a viable workflow is just to enter the debugger here at this shell that we get from init equals bin sh, then use that to set up kernel debugging breakpoints, whatever, and then exec bin or exec sbin init to continue on with the regular startup. Let's make sure that exec works like that. See, that's the problem I was trying to debug. I was distracted because there's a little more lag on this grabber than I was expecting. I don't know if that'll fix it. That's a little better. Okay. It's probably quicker to send a break, but that's another way of doing it. So we can get into the debugger that way. So yeah, we just need to do that in the other order to actually run the experiment now that we've done the control. Ooh, what is that? What? Error out of memory incompatible license. Is this just some bug that's causing strange memory corruption now? Hmm. The heck? Maybe we got some card corruption. I'm gonna check the BIOS first, but then maybe we read back the card and see if it got corrupted in some way that might cause this. Oh yeah, that's a good question. Someone's wondering if the board has a watchdog timer. Yes, it does, and I'm disabling it permanently in the grub startup script. So if we don't make it to the grub script, then it'll turn itself off. It actually seems to have two watchdog timers as far as I can tell. It's weird. It has one that seems to be designed for periodic use and one that seems to be designed for um, timing the startup process. That's so weird. I wonder where that error is even coming from. That's still correct. Oh, weird. Is that filter cutting the post beeps entirely? I'm not seeing it on my VU meter. Hmm. Hmm. I mean, these file systems had seen some writes differently, but like, I'm suspicious of this part where there's a area early on that's all zeroed. Definitely seems like a write might have gone badly during power off or something. Anyway. A little bit. Yeah, let's find out where this message is coming from. Okay. I think what's going on is that that's a generic non-driver specific message that looks like it's being printed by the driver, but it really indicates that this function is returning an error code. And it looks like their default is even enomem, so I guess that just means any of this resource allocation failed. So, yeah, let's just step through this and see where it's actually failing. Hopefully we just have a symbol for that PCMCIA init one. I don't know why we got a bad card. I mean, maybe the card is just failing. It's still writing. That's interesting. I don't know if that means anything, but I'm used to the card having a steady activity light and it's blinking now. It's just copying from the SD card on the Raspberry Pi to that USB CF card reader. I'm getting suspicious that that card is failing. Oh, the blinking pattern's changing. To go. Tuco's got an appointment with a new vet for a checkup this week. He hasn't been to the vet in a minute, and I finally got an appointment with this local vet that I've been wanting to see for a while. Hopefully Tuco doesn't mind too much. He hasn't been super annoyed at previous vet trips. I mean, no cat likes to go to the vet, right? Oh, purr, 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 purr. Gosh, the temptation is strong to just like unplug this card and plug it in and try again. I think that would actually help. Sure, it'd be nice to get it to boot off of a slightly more reliable device. Hmm. He's got this whole entire like heated chair set up over here. Gosh. Yeah, I'm gonna try power cycling this whole card writing assembly. soft. Yes, Tuco is a cat with thumbs. He has some great thumbs. Okay, let's do this again. Okay, I've got the continuously lit activity light on the card reader at least this time instead of the blinking. I think that's a good sign. Looks like it's almost done. I don't know. The light went back to the kind of more intermittent blinking. It's quite possible that this card is failing, and now I've got an additional problem to debug. I don't have any other identical cards. I could obtain one pretty inexpensively, but I might also just try to make a boot image that's small enough to fit on one of my other cards here. Here's what this is doing over here if we take a slight break from cat. There's our poor, probably on its last legs, 64 meg card in the cascade of adapters connected to the Raspberry Pi over there. There's the slot that it usually goes into in the computer that we're booting. And then those two PCMCIA slots in the back are useful. We're trying to debug those. Like I'm working on trying to get Linux to support them reliably. So right now they sometimes work, but have some annoying intermittent problems. And even in the best of times, I don't think there's any support for them in the BIOS. So I don't think there's any way to boot off of them. It's really designed to boot off of that small compact flash card slot. But at least last time I checked, I was having trouble even with sort of early BIOS boot up on cards that were bigger than the 64 meg card I have here. So if the 64 meg card is toast, either I need to switch to a smaller one or I need to debug why larger cards are not happy with the BIOS on here. I could also try to configure a adapter with the same size as the card that seems to be having trouble. I don't know if that would work. I'm not trying to make this a view of the messy table. This table is where I usually just put all the stuff that I'm using, but I don't actually need to film, so it ends up full of messy adapters and tools. And the data sheets that are now being used as coasters. Tuco's cute, but he's cleaning himself. Yeah, if anybody thinks kernel debugging is fun, I'd encourage you to try it out. It's fairly easy to get into and it's pretty low stakes if you're doing it on just like some random computer that you don't have information that's important on, which is certainly the way I'd recommend doing it. Or especially low stakes if you're doing it in some kind of emulated environment. I mean, there are certainly ways to get, into annoying situations where your computer is difficult to boot or you're even like risking hardware damage, but those situations are pretty well demarcated. And at least in modern computers, it's pretty hard to damage them permanently by accident. Like really, really hard. It used to be less hard, but like modern computers are pretty good about that. Mm, I did try adding like progress information to this DD, and it was not especially useful because I think most of this is going into the buffer cache first. So like we might be seeing write patterns that vary both depending on how this hardware is feeling and how the buffer cache in this Raspberry Pi is feeling. Gosh. I should look for backup cards in case this one is actually having trouble. Hmm. I actually don't have a great assortment of these. So there's that 64 meg. I have a 128 meg, which is one that I would like to use, but it seemed like the BIOS was not happy with it. Then I have that adapter, which is currently in the CF to PCMCIA adapter, and in the machine that way. I have a 4 megabyte card, which is enough for grub. I don't even know if I'd want to put the kernel on here though, and definitely not the root file system. So, and this is, I mean, I doubt there's much longevity to this either. So, I mean, maybe I just find a way to put grub on there and use it to, maybe I should be working on giving grub PCMCIA support at this point. Ugh. And so then I don't have much else, so maybe we do have to use the adapter. See how that works. Anyway, I'm counting my chickens early, I guess. But this card doesn't seem especially happy right now. Maybe I'll get NES desperate here and like unplug it from the adapter and reseat it in the slot and see if that helps. Oh yeah. That should be reading from the card, but it's very not. Lost async page write. Command timed out after 180 seconds. That is very unhappy. Love to have additional problems on top of the one I was trying to debug. Oh, that's a good question. Someone's wondering from chat whether I still have my Tuco flyer since it looks like I've moved since then. Yes, I did move. I This move has been complicated and it's been taking a while to get this new studio fully set up, but it was basically the beginning of 2020, like right before the pandemic when I did my move. Um, and I still have all the hardware for Tuco Flyer. I still have all the software. A lot of my whole configuration is different though. I no longer have a giant space like that. Um, I just put Linux on my streaming machine. I used to run Windows on there. There's a bunch of little things that I have to change. Um, but yeah, it'd be an interesting project to try to repurpose some of that stuff for another use. I still have the winch bots and the modified gimbal and all that. More than one way to keep an eye on what this is doing, right? Hmm. That's interesting. We've got that current disk write at the top at almost a megabyte per second, but it's not actually attributed to any of these processes. This is probably just missing some kind of IO accounting kernel option. DD is certainly at nearly 100% IO weight. Mm, getting clunky, and disk write is down to 0. Sure seems like the disk has a bad spot. Let's just try to verify this setup by swapping out the card, even though I can't actually boot off of this one. Let's just see if this writes. The build script does a bunch of unnecessary stuff before actually starting to copy the image. Alright, this is not the first time I've seen what seemed like it might be glitches coming from this card, so I'm suspicious the card is just failing, but it could be something else. Whoa, interesting. Disk write was bouncing around, but we had something writing at megabytes per second, but it's like mostly half the speed of the other card now. I wonder if that's part of the problem, is timing maybe. Oh man, I'm kind of excited to actually get a stream started earlier now that my setup is better. My audio setup was so broken before, and it is actually kind of nice now. I mean, I'm sure I need more tweaks to the filters and whatever, but it feels like a nicer framework. Oh man, these cards are so slow. If I had some kind of general purpose compact flash card emulator, it would be nice to make something that is very basic and just tries to please the BIOS during boot up and then swaps out for a standard but larger card as soon as that's done. There's a question from chat. How long have you been doing this? The stream has been going for about an hour and a half now. This particular project I've been working on off and on since like 2018, but like this recent spurt has been maybe a few weeks. As far as like fussing with computers, over 30 years at this point. I'm one of those old millennials, the late 30s millennials. And I started computering when I was a wee person, around 6 years old or so, probably. Tuco has such ears. Okay, that actually copied. So the script seems fine. It was slow, but it seems like it did actually copy the image. We could try booting off of it, but I don't think the geometry on these cards is similar enough to where that'll actually work. So I'm gonna try writing the 64 meg card again, see if it cooperates. Love to have a brand new problem. Right, those much faster disk writes are the SD card. Right, so this card is writing at around a megabyte a second, which is nice. I was used to these running at like 500K, but I haven't actually measured writes on this card. It's like still in the ballpark of what I'd expect. If this card seems to just have bad sectors somewhere, I could try to make my image for it smaller. Uh, I wonder how many write cycles this card's actually had. I probably used this card a bunch in a camera. Back when 64 megabytes actually held a useful quantity of photos. I mean, it wasn't a useful quantity of photos, but it was like there was this whole period of time when digital cameras were like obviously lower quality than film cameras, but were still useful to people because it was easier than the process of like developing film and scanning the film. So like if you wanted to take a picture and then like send it to your friends on IRC or whatever, like it was much easier to pull it off of a compact flash card, even if the quality was obviously worse than 35mm film. Oh, it's going into its unhappy blinking mode. Oh, will DD tell me how much it's copied so far if I kill it? Seems very wedged. Let's just see if we can make it smaller. This is frustrating. I think that's too small, but I just want to see how that works. That should give me an error. I want to make sure the error is the right error, and then that'll also give me an easy way to check what the actual size is, so I can make the image like a good size. Ready to go. Dooku's crawling around under my chair and squeaking now. Duke. You want the back door open, Tuco? Are we gonna test the noise filters on that? Okay, cool. That's still giving me the right kind of errors. Oh, I do kind of miss the frequent build hashes that the old style Docker builds give out. Such kernel. Kernels didn't used to be this big. I mean, this has a lot more functionality than an ancient kernel would, but it is 2.4 megs compressed. We could try to profile that to see where most of the space is going if we cared. It does seem like one way to do this if I do need the ability to run on small cards is to just include the kernel. I don't know if I want to try to make grub support PCMCIA because I'm suspecting that whatever chipset specific hacks I end up needing to make, that'll mean that I then have to make them in both Linux and in grub, whereas right now I just have to make them in Linux. Duke seems to like that. Gosh, that gating, I mean, it's not just gating, but like the noise filter seems to mostly just totally cut out the road noise here when that shows up. All right, anyway. 47 megs, really? SDL? Who brought all these libraries? Did I request SDL in this image for some reason? I can see why I might have wanted it in the big image. Maybe I just left it in this one for some reason. No mentions of SDL in my Docker file here. So rootfs small is just rootfs common with some stuff removed and a particular init script. And rootfs common is base with packages plus some of this stuff, which is probably where the packages I don't need are coming from. Oh. No? I mean, that should be fine. Base with packages has package files in user local package, but they aren't actually installed. Right, and then that's part of what's removed, making the small image. SDL itself isn't very big, but that's just like a particularly weird package to see in this list because I don't know why I would be depending on it. Linux console tools. Yeah, that was the package that I was trying to patch to get touchscreen support working, so I definitely don't need that until I've got the X server. Didn't realize that had any heavy dependencies. So I do need PCMCIA, NBD, DHCP client. I don't actually need E2FS progs, minicom, or Linux console tools. Those can go to the larger image. Let's see if I can do half the size. Still too many things. Too many things in the file system. 18 megs in lib and 20 in user. $13 megs of kernel modules. I don't really have anything in my scripts to split the kernel modules into stuff I want early and stuff I don't want early. What is even big here, though? Ooh, file system drivers. NFS, 3 megabytes. This is already unraveling. I just wanted to debug a kernel, right? And now I'm having trouble with my storage device and trying to find ways around it by making my disk image smaller. If we wanted to go to a different storage device, I would need to figure out exactly what the disk geometry is and whether I can map that to something that's compatible with the BIOS. Or that's another route to take. I built a little tool to help with that, which we can throw on the master boot record of, like, say, this SD to CF adapter, and then it'll boot, and the program in the master boot record will run, and it'll issue a command to the card to ask it for its disk geometry, which is something that should be built into the BIOS, but isn't. Right, I actually want to know where the bad spot is on this disk. Is there a nicer mode for that? I should just do the DD with progress and like direct or whatever, like disable the page cache. Hmm. Good morning. It's getting a little late here. I find myself to be a night owl a lot of the time, but I know a lot of folks like the earlier in the day streams, and I like having a varied schedule, so I'm gonna try to actually get some sleep at some point and then start this up early. But I feel like we haven't made any progress. This thing is just breaking in more and more ways. But at least my studio is working. Oh well. Fully equipped to record trash. I set this back to the full 64 meg geometry. Okay, that's better, yes. Status progress and O flags direct was certainly what I wanted there. I don't think the 4K block size is having any effect. Usually, or any impact really on performance. It's just making sure that we have a decently granular idea of what's working. Normally on a USB device, I wouldn't want to use any less than a 64K block size, but these things are slow enough, I don't think it matters. Hmm. Is it really failing right near the end? Interesting. Let's maybe just run that again to see if it's reproducible. All right, so we can adjust the length in multiples of 64K. Hmm. I thought that might have just been flushing, but we should be doing direct, and it's back in that flashing mode. Yeah, that was slightly earlier, but same general area. Hmm. Just building a new file system that's a slightly different size. Now Tuco and I are listening to all the outdoor noises and the streams getting them filtered out. I don't know which I prefer, but when I run this microphone without any noise filtering, you're mostly hearing electromagnetic interference from the lighting. Oh, I could actually add in a little bit of. There's a different microphone that doesn't seem to pick up the EMI. Could mix in some of that. There's just the outdoors noise and just enough echo that it makes it slightly awkward to talk. Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting audio combination, right? I've got a fairly effective noise filter on this mic, but then the mic on the camera over here has no filtering. And it's somewhat directional. And if I mute that, it's just totally quiet. Oh, our card programmed. Just had to make it 52 megabytes instead of 64. Okay, all good so far. We didn't hit any of the other problems, any of the new problems. Now we just have a regular KGDB. Well, KDB, and we're gonna switch to GDB. Ah. Make sure we've extracted the debug symbols. Large debug symbols. Extracting my large dwarves. Dwarfs. How do you pluralize dwarf? Linux, okay. Okay. Okay, finally we're back in the kernel debugger. Where were we going from here? Uh, this PCMCI init1 in parallel ATA. I don't know if that's gonna resolve to the right symbol. Hmm. Might be more reliable to set a breakpoint by a file. Okay. Continue booting. We've got an extension that helpfully forwards the print K messages through the kernel debugger so they show up in GDB, which is kind of handy. Oh. Are we already running the init script? Maybe we're already running the init script. How did I set that up? Oh yeah, so we were using two different debug options here. Before I was using this Linux rescue shell with serial debugging to reproduce the problem, and that required manually running the init script because this has init equals bin sh. But the thing we just did right now actually was a little more straightforward, where we ran this Linux serial debug menu item that I made earlier that uses, it's very slightly covered up, kgdb wait. So that will actually wait for the debugger to attach. We set our breakpoints, and then it continues with the regular old init script. And 2go1's out. So we got our breakpoints. Great. Let's make a little more room for this. Cool. So far so good. We're initializing an instance of this module, and we're examining a device, and I don't know if this is a probe that is used before or after we're definitely attaching to this device, but either way it's fine because this is the correct device. This is the what does it say, FC1307, which is the name of the IDE to SD bridge chip that this uses. Tuco. Tuco. Wow. Hey. Hey. Is that filtering out Tuco but keeping me? Does that just sound like I'm talking to nobody? Hey Tuco. Gosh, that filter is sensitive. But it does sound echoey when I'm back here. And then when I'm actually close to the microphone, there's a lot less echo. Hey Tuco, talk to me so I can see if the mic picks you up. Aw, that came through. Aw, you like that? Let's get some more camera situations. Tuco. Kitty licks. Hey. Ow. Tuco. That's pretty relatable. There's a comment from chat that someone was assuming at first that KGDB was the KDE front end for GDB. Yeah, that sounds familiar. I wouldn't be surprised if I made that mistake in the past also. There are some good front ends for GDB. There's one that I used to use called DDD. I doubt it's still maintained. There are probably better ones now. I mean, a lot of people just run an IDE of some sort that has its own GDB integration. Well, GDB or LLDB these days. I haven't tried doing much embedded debugging with LLDB, other than with systems where I'm actually using LLVM as the main compiler. Interesting to see what works and what needs adaptation there. Tuco. Mm. 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 Such a little tiger. Alright, we should get some work done too, so I can keep the stream from dragging on. Can I share that seat too, go? Huh. Loop config. I should try that again, but go through that PCMCIA check one config, and maybe even go through that entire loop, but it looks like that first thing is failing. Okay, well I need to get another instance of this computer now. Let's reboot. That's always the fun part of system debugging, is like doing experiments that you keep having to reset up because the machine crashes if they complete. Beep, beep, beep. I wonder if the noise filter cuts out multimeter beeps entirely. That it does. Yeah, so I guess I'll want to add some room noise separately if I'm actually trying to get the multimeter beeps. Right? Like that. Interesting. Well, hopefully that'll leave plenty of room for editing stuff if I want to use this audio later while making the streams easier to listen to. Okay, that's at least pretty easy to reproduce now. Okay, loops over all configuration options, calls the driver-specific configuration check on each one. I keep being worried about using these symbols because the names sound so generic, but like I don't actually have any other modules loaded that use symbols like this. What's Tuco up to? Is he hunting something? Hmm. This is probably where we should be throwing additional print K, right? Hey, Tuco. Tuco, you want out? Tuco, what? I got more to do. I think Tuco wants to hang out with me somewhere that isn't here. Which, like, yes, we should do that, but not quite yet. Okay, allocate IO space. Okay. Is it possible we're low on IO space? I thought we had a nice big chunk of it. Oh, find IO failed. Hmm. Tuco. 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 Ah. Okay. Gosh, well, maybe I should wrap this up and we could focus next time on turning on loads of those print K debug. So like these dev debugs, we can turn those on at runtime just with kernel command line argument. And it seems like this is almost certainly a problem with PCMCIA resource allocation. We could also look and see what the resource maps actually look like in /proc at the console before we're crashing. But yeah, at this point, this is basically crashed. This is going to bubble this error up and turn it into something else. But what is -2? I thought -2 was something familiar. Whoa, loud boy. Oh, Tuco, what are you doing? Tuco, don't be doing that. No, hey. Oh, that's just Ian Bell. That's like the most generic error. We weren't trying to request 0 IOs, were we? I wasn't looking that closely at the request, but I think it's going to be easier to decode the request with turning on this print K than doing it in GDB. Hey, Tuco, what do you want to do? Can we do something that is more chill? Hey, Tuco. Tuco. Well, cool. Well, thanks for hanging out on the stream. I think I'm going to wrap it up here, but try to get an earlier start tomorrow. And thanks for bearing with me as I didn't stream for a couple days to rework the AV setup here a little bit. I feel like this is a big improvement and should be smoother for me and a little bit more easy listening for folks. So yeah, I will get on the stream tomorrow. We will. Oh, is Tuco really just climbing the door? Tuco, what are you doing that for? Tuco! Honey, I don't know if you want to do that. Hey, that looked hard. I don't want you to get stuck. Cool. Well, thanks for hanging out on the stream today. I will see you tomorrow.